It's time for my preview of Thin Ice. Hope you're not trembling on thin ice, because you will fall and you will die. Just a bit of sinister darkness there for me. Hope you enjoy my preview for Thin Ice. Let's begin, and I hope you enjoy. Hey guys, what's up? I'm back with another video, and in today's video we're going to do the preview for Doctor Who's next episode, Thin Ice. Now this episode I was really looking forward to in the Next Time trailer because it felt such a very sinister and very dark period historical episode. Now I know in the past in Doctor Who, in the new series especially, like The Unquiet Dead and Shakespeare Code, I've really enjoyed those period historicals because they always have a very soft spot in my heart, and for this episode I can really see that this episode is going to be a great historical because of how dark and how eerie the location looks. The location looks absolutely fantastic, and I just wish that maybe could we be expected a great dark episode, because I know from the past couple of episodes, Smile and the pilot, funny enough, I've accepted them to be really great episodes to start off series 10, but now I hope that maybe Thin Ice will be the introduction to a much darker series. So I'm hoping that maybe Thin Ice could be the starting point to a darker series for series 10. So that's what I'm really hoping for. But I was really interested with Thin Ice before I read this fantastic article on Doctor Who magazine, well, this month's issue of Doctor Who magazine. Well, you know that I mentioned this one in the previous preview that I did, and this article is so amazing, and there was some great little quotes that I'm going to mention in this preview. But this episode is going to be so fantastic, and it's the one episode that I'm really intrigued with because it's set in the past, and it's quite interesting to see how Doctor Who follow a very similar pattern with doing so many different episodes for each series. So like, you've got the first 3 episodes for each series. One episode is always like starting out in the modern kind of day. Then in the second episode it's either the past or the future, but then the third episode would usually decide that if the series has done a futuristic kind of episode, they would usually go into the past, and it would be vice versa if it was the opposite way around. So I'm really interested to see how Bill reacts to the past, and funnily enough that in the synopsis it does say that it's not that the past is more like her world than she expected. So does it may have some very similar things that may come into play with her world? So I'm actually really quite intrigued to see her reaction to the past. So I'm actually really looking forward to this episode, and what's lurking under the Thames is what I'm really interested, just to see what kind of series plotline would happen in this episode, because I'm not thinking that this episode will be of a very light-hearted, weak plotline. I think this episode will have a very strong and very dark plotline, which I'm really looking forward to. I know sometimes in Doctor Who, when they do dark episodes, they sometimes have a complicated plotline, but I sometimes really understand these dark kind of plotlines through Peter Capaldi, and through his point of view I can really understand what he's talking about. So I'm actually quite interested with this episode, so we might as well get started with the synopsis, as we always do it with the little pieces of paper. Right, so the Doctor and Bill arrive at the last Great Frost Fair in Regency, England, and find themselves investigating a string of impossible disappearances. People have been vanishing on the ice. Bill is about to discover the past is more like her world than she expected, and not all monsters come from outer space. Now, from that little last sentence, not all monsters come from space, so that means that maybe this monster underneath the Thames could be a mutation, or it could be a very big fish initially. So I'm probably thinking that it's not going to be an alien creature underneath the Thames that's been frozen over with the ice. And strange fact with the ice, that the title's called Thin Ice, and then they have a elephant in the location. But just to mention about the elephant, within the last cliffhanger for episode 2, Smile, they landed in the region for the next episode, Thin Ice. I really liked how it had a very classic Who reference to it. It had a very classic style ending to Smile, because usually in classic Who you would have episodes that would start off in the episode and then usually finish off in like the next episode. So I had that kind of feeling that Smile really gave us a little insight to the next episode, sort of like a representation of a classic Who ending in my opinion. So I really liked that. And then when it happened with the elephant, I thought it was really weird to have like an elephant there, but then after reading this amazing article, I actually found out that they didn't in fact have elephants in those times to test if the ice could stand up against an elephant, because you know elephants, they're really heavy. And just before 1814, the Thames would usually often freeze, and usually they would get an elephant maybe to test how strong the ice was, and if the elephant did fall through, then it wouldn't be a problem. They'll probably get some rope and pull it out. But I sort of have a feeling that in this episode it's not going to be as thick ice as you can, because as the episode is now titled Thin Ice. So I'm hoping that maybe, judging by the disappearances, that will there be quite a few, and will the Doctor be intrigued that is something underneath the ice eating people that have been just fallen into the ice. So I'm actually really looking forward to this episode. But is this going to be the first episode that we see some actual danger for once? Because as the two previous episodes, The Pilot and Smile, they haven't really had a very great sense of danger. But I'm hoping that maybe does Bill get attacked by one of these creatures underneath the ice, and is Bill in danger for once? That's the one thing I'm really hoping in this episode. Is Bill in danger for the first time? And how will the Doctor react to that? We'll have to find out on Saturday. But judging by this amazing article that I've just completely read, there's also a very great nutshell. Well, basically, if you can say that in a nutshell, there's like a little segment here that I'll just read it out for you guys, so you'll be able to know what I'm on about. So, Series 10, Episode 3, written by Sarah Dollard and directed by Bill Anderson. In a nutshell, 4th of February 1814, London and the Doctor chill out at the last Great Frost Fair on the frozen Thames, enjoying the carnival atmosphere and eating pies. Strangely enough, eating pies is what I should do. To be honest with you, I've already had dinner anyway, to be honest. But sinister lights are swarming beneath the ice, luring people to their doom in the black depths of the river. As the Doctor gets on the case, a desperate band of local urchins provide the clues he needs. Some powerful and ruthless is plotting to attract as many people to the fair as possible. But why? And what lurks at the bottom of the Thames, waiting implacable for the first omniscient cracks in the ice? So that, in a nutshell, is so of a great, interesting synopsis. Almost like a very similar synopsis to this, but I think this one has a bit more in detail depth to the episode. But since the lights are swarming beneath the ice and luring people to their dooms, so will there be some intimidating lights? I know from a couple of promo pics that I've seen that the Doctor's holding some strange fish with a very like light sensitive antennae on the top. So will these little urchins will swarm around in like I saw a little promo kind of preview clip on the Doctor Who YouTube channel. I'll put the link in the description down below so you could go and check it out. It's a scene where Bill is stood on the ice and she's talking to the Doctor, and then the lights kind of surround her in a way, and then suddenly they break the ice and Bill falls through, and then the Doctor goes after her and dives into the ice. So from that, I can see that maybe are these urchins quite dark and quite sinister in their nature? They're not probably just there to be harmless. I think they're quite sinister within their nature in that sense. But what interests me is that what's happening to the disappearing people? Are they being dragged down under the ice by the creatures underneath the Thames? Or is there something else that I sort of have a theory of this? A very sneaky suspicion that I sort of have. And in a few of the trailers and of the Next Time trailer for Thin Ice, there's one character in a blue kind of royalty cloak, and I don't know his character's name, but I do know the actor called Nicholas Burns, am I correct? Yes, it does have the actors' names in this issue of Doctor Who magazine as well, in this article here. Yeah, Nicholas Burns, played by Lord Sutcliffe. So I'm actually quite thinking that could he be responsible for all the disappearances? So I've actually quite have a few kind of ideas of what could happen in this episode. Maybe it could be that the creature underneath the Thames could be quite a parent and it's looking after its young or something like that, and so perhaps maybe the people will try and capture its urchins, its young, and then maybe will the creature get angry and start to eat people, that maybe when people step onto the ice they fall through and get eaten by the creature. That's probably what I'm probably thinking. But there's another kind of sneaky suspicion that I might have in my head, is that maybe Lord Sutter is actually causing the disappearances, but is actually forcing the blame onto the creature underneath the Thames. So it's actually really interesting of what way could this plotline go. I mean, it could have so many twists on this episode. I'm really looking forward to see what actually happens with this episode. Is Nicholas Briggs responsible for the disappearances and just blaming it on the creature, or is it actually the creature itself actually causing a very threatening force towards Bill and the Doctor, and also to the people for the disappearances? So I'm actually really looking forward to this episode, and I can sort of see that the Bill is actually being quite threatened in this episode, actually being trapped under the ice, and she's also quite amazed that this actually could be her first trip in the past, and to see how new and how old it kind of is. And again, I'm really looking forward to her questions, because you can sort of see in this episode, in every single episode, she always has this kind of urge to ask weird and unusual questions, and I always like that in these kind of episodes, because when she kind of reacts to something for the first time, I'm always wondering to see what her reactions will be, and like, are there any side effects to time travel, and like, can you break the laws of time travel if you break or step on a butterfly or something like that. So I'm actually quite interested to see what kind of questions will Bill ask in this episode. Out of all of the companions, what I like about Bill is that she actually analyzes what actually time travel is, because she actually seen many films from like the Star Trek films, and she's seen sci-fi for real. But compared to with her to other companions, when companions usually say that we're in the past, they wouldn't usually care of the danger of breaking laws of time travel, and if they change something, they wouldn't even care if something did happen that wouldn't usually cooperate or be anything in the past. So they would probably do something that wouldn't usually go along in the past. So they'll probably just break the laws of time without even caring. But Bill, on the other hand, would usually say, would take precautions of maybe what are the side effects of breaking time travel, and can you really change the past? So she's asking the questions that maybe she's actually taking precautions and trying not to break the laws of time, and trying to not change the future or change the past. So I'm actually really like that about Bill, because she's quite cautious when she's going to a different type of place, even if the future or in the past. She's quite cautious of where she goes and her reactions. Although she's amazed by all of this, she also has some very good precautions of where she's asking those of unusual and interesting questions that we would like to ask as well. So I'm really seeing that Bill is kind of the best companion to ask very unusual questions, but is actually taking precautions and taking care of herself for once, instead of throwing herself in and being causing all of this danger. So I'm actually really looking forward to Bill's kind of adventure in the past, and see her reaction to all of this in the past, and seeing how similar it is to her world, because as in the synopsis says that the past is more like her world than she expected. So it's probably like the past that she kind of reminds herself that all of these men are quite forcing her, and it's quite the same thing with like her world today. And so maybe that sort of has like an unusual theme to the episode, so we're not too sure. We'll have to find out on Saturday's episode. And I think with this strong plotline that's maybe introduced to the episode will really help with creating this episode as a very dark historical. Now, one thing that I did mention about how back in the 1800s of where London was completely froze over and they had so many freak snowstorms and the temperature was extremely cold, and for that temperature to be like extremely cold to freeze the River Thames, and how did they get an elephant to test how thick the ice was? But strangely enough, as I was reading this amazing article on thin ice, one quote kind of made me quite suspicious and quite interested and fascinated about this episode, is that Sarah Dollard mentioned in this interview that the Thames would often completely freeze over in the 1800s, but after 1814, it never froze again. This episode is an explanation why. So, from that quote, I'm more than interested to see what stops the cold from freezing the River Thames. So it kind of happens over and over and over again, just before 1814, but just after this sudden year, it never froze again. But why? That's what I'm really looking forward to this episode. Maybe we'll get the explanation that we wanted to see. How did 1814 be the year that stops the River Thames from ever freezing again? So we're probably expecting a really great explanation from the Doctor, maybe. But from the Doctor's reaction in this episode, I can see that he's not really interested and he doesn't really have a smile on his face. Even from when Bill's reaction saying, "Get in!" The Doctor's having like a very unusual and very unhappy face, I can see. And he's probably not that interested at all. But although he's quite angry in this episode, and especially in a few trailer pics that I've seen, that the Doctor actually punching somebody, I think it's that Peter Capaldi actually punches Nicholas Burns, the person with all the blue clothing. So how did the Doctor get so angry to punch somebody? I mean, it comes to the mind that how does the Doctor get so tempted to punch somebody? I mean, the Doctor's incredibly sensitive and quite emotional, and he has a great duty of care, and he always does that throughout his entire companions, especially with Clara Oswald in Series 9, had a duty of care, but also he has some incredible thinking as well, which I always like about his Doctor. I mean, if there was the one Doctor who would provide the great explanations to everything, it would be Peter Capaldi, in my opinion. And just the way that the Doctor gets quite angry when he's talking to people who would usually disagree with him. I mean, he gets disagreed on all of the time, but what provokes him to make him punch somebody? That's what I really want to find out, because he's quite a very sensitive man, and if somebody doesn't like his thinking, then he would usually get provoked, and you never know what triggers him off to actually punch somebody in the face. So I'm really looking forward to what actually happens within this episode, because it actually sees that the Doctor gets quite excited to either discover to see what's lurking underneath the ice. I mean, this plot could actually turn out to be that the creature underneath the ice is actually eating people for revenge, since that maybe these people are actually making a profit out of selling these unusual urchins or the creature's young, maybe. So there's loads of different ideas on what kind of plot twists could happen in this episode. So I'm actually really looking forward to what actually happens, because within these plot twists, I mean, I really like the idea of how the creature takes up revenge and starts to eat people from the disappearing people underneath the ice. Maybe they get eaten by the creature, and just that triggers off like Nicholas Burns' character to go with his men and sort of kill the thing, but do it slowly, that it could be like the biggest catch of the century and they could usually cut it up and cook it for food, really. So maybe it's a very interesting plot, and it's a very interesting episode of what could happen within this episode. But my mind is still on that the creature still wants revenge from these people, and that the humans want to make a profit from this creature, but they want to kill it slowly and gain a lot of money for it. So maybe that's probably what I'm thinking about this episode. But there have been so many promo pics, especially there's one promo picture that the Doctor and Bill look at each other, and it's that they're looking at the eye that in Series 10 trailer. That really psyched me up for what could be that eye, and you never know, guys, you have to keep your eye on it. Do you see what I did there? eye on it. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to see what kind of creature is it, and is it actually becoming a very incredible threat, or is it going to be quite of a weak kind of plot that would actually disappoint us? Because whenever we have like low expectations of Doctor Who stories, we will usually be quite surprised and really shocked about how great that episode was. But when we sometimes have high expectations, do we sometimes kind of regret that, right, that could have been a bit better? So we would have expected more from her writing. And so I sometimes see that many people are quite decisive whether to have high expectations or low expectations for Doctor Who episodes, to make us quite surprised and intrigued with the episode entirely. So maybe I'm quite intrigued on the similar, I have low expectations because I really want this episode to be a success, but also I have high expectations because I don't really want this episode to be a very dull story. I mean, Sarah Dulles wrote Face the Raven as her debut, which was an exceptional, brilliant episode. So maybe we are hoping for an incredible episode that maybe we'll get our hopes up, but maybe it's actually worried me that maybe could this episode not live up to the expectations that we hoped for. So maybe it kind of gets us a bit worried that maybe she won't deliver a great episode that maybe we were hoping for. So I'm actually a bit on the nervy side of whether to go with low expectations or high expectations, but I'm seriously intrigued with this episode and to see what could be the plot in this episode, because I think the plot definitely needs to be on point for this episode, because although with the two other episodes that we've had, like the pilot and Smile, they've been episodes with a very weak and quite simple plotline, but I'm hoping with this plotline in Thin Ice, it'll be quite dark and a very strong and a very sinister plotline that could really intrigue us and make us quite aware that maybe this could be the episode that actually Bill gets actually threatened and actually be intimidated by. So will we actually see some danger from Bill being captured or being eaten by this amazing creature? Will Bill actually be killed in this episode? So we're not too sure, but I definitely think it won't be that, that Bill would be killed in this episode. But I do see some danger in this episode that this episode could be a really great episode. So I'm seriously looking forward to this episode so much. And just to my mind, that I really love the idea of how just a certain year just seems like that year is so special because the Thames never froze again. So what makes that theory stop the entire River Thames freeze again? Although it's happened in the past with before 1814 ever existed, the Thames would usually freeze over because of the cold temperatures. But what made this stop at 1814? We're not too sure, but it provides I hope for a great in-depth explanation through this episode on why does it happen. So I'm really looking forward to this episode. I think this is the most episode that I've been intrigued to for such a long time, and even so directed by Bill Anderson. Even the historical shots of what it looks so amazing. I think, in my opinion, that could be one of the best sets designs in Series 10. I have to say that could be a really interesting set. I mean, with the budget that they had, and to do all of that snow, and it looked very historical, and I just really love the location. It just looks so amazing, and even judging by the still shots of the location, Bill Anderson feels like a really great director, and I'm hoping that maybe he stays on Doctor Who and does some really great, stories. Like maybe, I think he's doing the fourth episode as well. So I'm actually looking forward to his directing as well. So will he provide some great high quality shots? And I'm just really looking forward to see how the quality stands out with this episode. I mean, this episode is just the one that I've been looking forward to for such a long time. Whenever I saw Sarah Dulles' name on this episode, I knew straight away that this episode could be so huge. And even from Face the Raven's humongous success, although it was a very emotional episode for me, however, I'm really looking forward to this episode, and I'm really just hoping that maybe could this be the episode that's... I know that the Doctor and Bill have had such a great chemistry between each other, and I always love their amazing relationship, that they complement each other, and the Doctor likes what Bill's thinking and Bill likes what the Doctor's thinking. But maybe in this episode, will we see some clashes between their personalities? I'm just hoping that maybe does Bill kind of say, I mean, she does say in like the final sentence at the next time trailer, have you ever killed somebody? And then the doctor's like looking at her like, yes, but I'm not going to say it. So it's actually coming to the point that maybe does Bill disagree with the doctor for once, and do they get on opposite terms? So maybe could that have like an effect on their chemistry and their relationship? So I'm actually just hoping for Bill and the doctor to go, you know, one-on-one with each other and to see, do they have different opinions and do they kind of contradict each other? So I'm actually just looking forward to see, do they have a bit of chemistry? Do they have a bit of feistiness with their relationship? Does the doctor think differently? And has the doctor ever killed somebody? He's saying yes in his head, but actually he's saying like, yes, but I'm not going to say it. So it's coming to the point where Bill and the doctor are actually getting quite well with each other, but I really want to see that kind of diversity, that they're actually going to go one-on-one with each other and actually going to fight with each other with their thinking and how differently they think to each other. So I'm actually just looking forward to a contrast between their relationship. So it's actually going to be a really exciting episode, and judging by how excited I am for this episode, I'm really looking forward to it. I think this could be the start to a darker series for Series 10. I mean, this episode just generally feels like a very dark and very sinister, threatening episode. Just judging by what's underneath the Thames just really intrigues me. And the plot just definitely needs to be on point, a very strong, a very dark plot line, because it definitely really needs the support that it just definitely needs, because from the other two episodes, it's been absolutely so simple and so weak. But I just hope that maybe this episode will we see a very much darker, very much sinister plotline. And I'm also really intrigued just to see, like, even so here, Peter Capaldi right here in that top hat just feels like very much like a Patrick Troughton kind of character. But it's just to the point that I love the kind of set designs, and the costumes look absolutely incredible. And you could just see down there in the corner, Peter Capaldi is just actually punching somebody. So what actually provokes him to actually punch somebody? I mean, Peter Capaldi is quite a sensitive doctor, but what actually provokes him and triggers him to actually lash out a deadly attack on a normal human being? So does somebody actually disagree with him and actually get on his terms? And does actually that provoke the doctor and actually punches him? So maybe, I'm not too sure what actually quite happens within that, but I'm hoping that it's going to be something that maybe triggers off the doctor to actually punch somebody. So I'm actually looking forward to see Peter Capaldi's much darker doctor this time, because although we've had his doctor being quite light-hearted with the pilot and Smile, I'm just hoping that maybe this episode, could it be much of his darker doctor that's been introduced back into Doctor Who? I mean, from Series 8, that was much of his darker season, but will his doctor be introduced to his darker doctor in this episode? That's what I'm hoping for, because I think with this episode, the darker plotline and the darker threat will kind of match his darker personality within this episode. So I'm just really looking forward to this episode, and I just seriously can't say how much I'm looking forward to this episode. Is Nicholas Burns' character behind all this for the disappearances, or is it actually the creature underneath the Thames? Is Nicholas Briggs' character going to actually sell the creature, or is he going to actually kill the creature? So I'm actually just quite looking forward to see what kind of plot twist could happen in this episode. But most importantly of all, I'm looking for what the explanation is that the Thames would often completely freeze over, but what after 1814 it never froze again. This episode is an explanation why, and I'm certainly looking forward to that explanation. That certainly intrigues me. But also, guys, I highly recommend, if you have this magazine, you should definitely have a read of this article on Thin Ice, because it's so amazing. And to see how did Sarah Dollard pick up all of these amazing ideas to maybe come up with a brilliant Doctor Who episode. And I could possibly maybe say it could be the darkest episode from Series 10. But we're not too sure really, but I'm hoping it could be one of those dark episodes from Doctor Who. So I'm really hoping that this episode goes so well for Sarah Dollard, but also goes well for also the fans, because I'm certainly looking forward to this episode. It's the episode that I've been looking forward to for such a long time, and I hope that maybe I get my darker doctor back finally from a Series 8 absence. Maybe do I get a much darker Doctor in this episode? I'm hoping that maybe will we see a much darker personality within his Doctor. That's what I'm looking forward to. And overall, as I've said, with what could be lurking underneath the Thames, on what's the explanation for 1814 being the year that the Thames never froze again, Bill being introduced to all of this, I'm certainly looking forward to this episode. How can I not be looking forward to this episode? This could be one of the most darkest episodes for a dark, pure historical for a new series of Doctor Who. So I'm just really hoping for what happens in this episode. I think it's going to be so good. So guys, that's my preview on Thin Ice. I hope you have enjoyed it. Make sure you leave this video a like, but also comment down below what your thoughts are going to be for Thin Ice and what could possibly happen in Thin Ice. And make sure you do subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. So thank you guys for watching for this preview, and I hope you stick around for my review on Thin Ice. Now, I am going to be quite busy on Sunday, so I will hopefully get my review done maybe by Monday. So I hope you probably stick around for that as well. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys later for my review for Thin Ice. Thank you guys for watching, and make sure you keep an eye on what's on the eye on Thin Ice. Get it? To be honest with you, I think I'm just going to leave it at there. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.